close my observations upon Ireland at this point the more readily, as the repeal agitation of 1843 and O'Connell's trial have been the means of making the Irish distress more and more known in Germany. We have now followed the proletariat of the British Islands through all branches of its activity, and found it everywhere living in want and misery under totally inhuman conditions. We have seen discontent arise with the rise of the proletariat, grow, develop, and organize. We have seen open bloodless and bloody battles of the proletariat against the bourgeoisie. We have investigated the principles according to which the fate, the hopes, and fears of the proletariat are determined, and we have found that there is no prospect of improvement in their condition. We have had an opportunity, here and there, of observing the conduct of the bourgeoisie towards the proletariat, and we have found that it considers only itself, has only its own advantage in view. However, in order not to be unjust, let us investigate its mode of action somewhat more exactly. The attitude of the bourgeoisie towards the proletariat. In speaking of the bourgeoisie, I include the so-called aristocracy, for this is a privileged class, an aristocracy, only in contrast with the bourgeoisie, not in contrast with the proletariat. The proletarian sees in both only the property holder, i.e., the bourgeois. Before the privilege of property all other privileges vanish. The sole difference is this, that the bourgeois proper stands in active relations with the manufacturing, and, in a measure, with the mining proletarians, and, as farmer, with the agricultural laborers, whereas the so-called aristocrat comes into contact with the agricultural laborer only. I have never seen a class so deeply demoralized, so incurably debased by selfishness, so corroded within, so incapable of progress, as the English bourgeoisie, and I mean by this, especially the bourgeoisie proper, particularly the liberal, corn law repealing bourgeoisie. For it nothing exists in this world, except for the sake of money, itself not excluded. It knows no bliss save that of rapid gain, no pain save that of losing gold. 276 In the presence of this avarice and lust of gain, it is not possible for a single human sentiment or opinion to remain untainted. True, these English bourgeois are good husbands and family men, and have all sorts of other private virtues, and appear, in ordinary intercourse, as decent and respectable as all other bourgeois. Even in business they are better to deal with than the Germans. They do not haggle so much as our own pettifogging merchants. But how does this help matters? Ultimately it is self-interest, and especially money gain, which alone determines them. I once went into Manchester with such a bourgeois, and spoke to him of the bad unwholesome method of building, the frightful condition of the working people's quarters, and asserted that I had never seen so ill-built a city. The man listened quietly to the end, and said at the corner where we parted, "And yet there is a great deal of money made here. Good morning, sir." It is utterly indifferent to the English bourgeois, whether his working men starve or not, if only he makes money. All the conditions of life are measured by money, and what brings no money is nonsense, unpractical idealistic bosh. Hence, political economy, the science of wealth, is the favorite study of these bartering Jews. Every one of them is a political economist. The relation of the manufacturer to his operatives has nothing human in it, it is purely economic. The manufacturer is capital, the operative labor. And if the operative will not be forced into this abstraction, if he insists that he is not labor, but a man, who possesses, among other things, the attribute of labor force, if he takes it into his head that he need not allow himself to be sold and bought in the market as the commodity labor, the bourgeois reason comes to a standstill. He cannot comprehend that he holds any other relation to the operatives than that of purchase and sale. He sees in them not human beings, but hands, as he constantly calls them to their faces. He insists, as Carlyle says, that cash payment is the only nexus between man and man. Even the relation between himself and his wife is, in 99 cases out of 100, mere cash payment. Money determines the worth of the man. He is worth £10,000. He who has money is of the better sort of people, is influential, and what he does counts for something in his social circle. The huckstering spirit penetrates the whole language. All relations are expressed in business terms, in economic categories. Supply and demand are the formulas according to which the logic of the English bourgeois judges all human life. Hence free competition in every respect, Hence the regime of laissez-faire, laissez-aller in government, in medicine, in education, and soon to be in religion too, as the state church collapses more and more. Free competition will suffer no limitation, no state supervision. The whole state is but a burden to it. It would reach its highest perfection in a wholly ungoverned anarchic society, where each might exploit the other to his heart's content. Since, however, the bourgeoisie cannot dispense with government, but must have it to hold the equally indispensable proletariat in check, it turns the power of government against the proletariat and keeps out of its sway as far as possible. Let no one believe, however, that the cultivated Englishman openly brags with his egotism. On the contrary, he conceals it under the vilest hypocrisy. What? The wealthy English fail to remember the poor? They who have founded philanthropic institutions, such as no other country can boast of. Philanthropic institutions forsooth. As though you rendered the proletarians a service in first sucking out their very lifeblood, and then practicing your self-complacent Pharisaic philanthropy upon them, placing yourselves before the world as mighty benefactors of humanity, when you give back to the plundered victims the 100th part of what belongs to them. Charity which degrades him who gives more than him who takes, charity which treads the downtrodden still deeper in the dust, which demands that the degraded, the pariah cast out by society, shall first surrender the last that remains to him, his very claim to manhood, shall first beg for mercy before your mercy deigns to press, in the shape of an alms, the brand of degradation upon his brow. But let us hear the English bourgeoisie's own words. It is not yet a year since I read in the Manchester Guardian the following letter to the editor, which was published without comment as a perfectly natural reasonable thing. Mr. Editor, for some time past our main streets are haunted by swarms of beggars, who try to awaken the pity of the passers-by in a most shameless and annoying manner, by exposing their tattered clothing, sickly aspect, and disgusting wounds and deformities. I should think that when one not only pays the poor rate, but also contributes largely to the charitable institutions, one has done enough to earn a right to be spared such disagreeable and impertinent molestations. And why else do we pay such high rates for the maintenance of the municipal police, if they do not even protect us so far as to make it possible to go to or out of town in peace? I hope the publication of these lines in your widely circulated paper may induce the authorities to remove this nuisance, and I remain, your obedient servant, a lady. There you have it. The English bourgeoisie is charitable out of self-interest. It gives nothing outright, but regards its gifts as a business matter, makes a bargain with the poor, saying if I spend this much upon benevolent institutions, I thereby purchase the right not to be troubled any further, and you are bound thereby, to stay in your dusky holes, and not to irritate my tender nerves by exposing your misery. You shall despair as before, but you shall despair unseen. This I require, this I purchase with my subscription of £20 for the infirmary. It is infamous, this charity of a Christian bourgeois. And so writes a lady, she does well to sign herself such, well that she has lost the courage, to call herself a woman. But if the ladies are such as this, what must the gentlemen be? It will be said, that this is a single case, but no, the foregoing letter expresses the temper of the great majority of the English bourgeoisie, or the editor would not have accepted it, and some reply would have been made to it, which I watched for in vain in the succeeding numbers. And as to the efficiency of this philanthropy, Canon Parkinson himself says, that the poor are relieved much more by the poor than by the bourgeoisie, and such relief given by an honest proletarian who knows himself what it is to be hungry, for whom sharing his scanty meal is really a sacrifice, but a sacrifice borne with pleasure. Such help has a wholly different ring to it from the carelessly tossed arms of the luxurious bourgeois. In other respects too, the bourgeoisie assumes a hypocritical boundless philanthropy, but only when its own interests require it, as in its politics and political economy. It has been at work now well on towards 5 years, to prove to the working men, that it strives to abolish the Corn Laws solely in their interest. But the long and short of the matter is this: the Corn Laws keep the price of bread higher than in other countries, and thus raise wages, but these high wages render difficult competition of the manufacturers against other nations in which bread, and consequently wages, are cheaper. The Corn Laws being repealed, the price of bread falls, and wages gradually approach those of other European countries, as must be clear to everyone from our previous exposition of the principles according to which wages are determined. the manufacturer can compete more readily, the demand for English goods increases, and, with it, the demand for labor. In consequence of this increased demand, wages would actually rise somewhat, and the unemployed workers be re-employed, but for how long? The surplus population of England, and especially of Ireland, is sufficient to supply English manufacture with